The transport ship Galactic Harmony shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Maya Chen pressed her face against the viewport to catch her first glimpse of Kepler Station. The massive orbital research facility hung like a glittering jewel against the backdrop of the gas giant Titan 7, its countless lights twinkling in the eternal twilight of space. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Dr. Vextar, the Altarian xenobiologist who had been assigned as her supervisor. His purple skin shifted through several shades as he spoke, a sign of excitement that Maya was still learning to read. 3 years of preparation, and we're finally ready to begin the apex predator study. Maya nodded, though her stomach churned with nervous energy. At 23, she was the youngest researcher ever selected for the Galactic Science Consortium's most dangerous project. Fresh out of the Terra Nova xenobiology program, she had somehow beaten out candidates with decades of experience. She still wasn't sure how. "Remember," Dr. Vexistar continued, his tentacle-like fingers tapping against his datapad, "this project has already claimed the lives of 17 researchers. The creatures we're studying aren't just dangerous, they're considered impossible to contain by every major civilization in the galaxy. The Kethmori Empire spent 2 centuries trying to weaponize them before giving up. The Crystalline Collective declared them an extinction-level threat after losing an entire research fleet." The ship docked with a soft thud that reverberated through the hull. Maya gathered her small bag of personal belongings, her hands trembling slightly. She had read every file, every report, every scientific paper about the creatures they would be studying. Nothing had prepared her for the weight of actually being here. Kepler Station was even more impressive from the inside. The main corridor stretched for nearly a kilometer, lined with laboratories, living quarters, and observation decks. Dozens of species moved through the halls, tall, graceful Etherians with their flowing robes, stocky mineral-born with their rocky skin, and sleek Aquarians in their mobile water suits. Maya was one of only 12 humans on the entire station. "The Shadow Maws," Dr. Vextar explained as they walked, "are apex predators from the dead world of Vex Prime. They stand 3 meters tall, weigh approximately 800 kilograms, and possess adaptive camouflage that makes them nearly invisible. Their claws can cut through military-grade armor. Their bite force exceeds that of any known creature, and they demonstrate problem-solving abilities that rival most sentient species." They stopped before a massive blast door marked with warnings in 47 different languages. Maya could read the human warning. "Extreme danger. Authorized personnel only. Lethal force authorized." "The station has been under construction for 3 years," Dr. Vextar continued. "Every safety protocol known to galactic science has been implemented. Energy barriers, physical containment, sedation systems, even a localized gravitational field to slow the creature's movements. We've spared no expense." The blast door opened with a deep rumble, revealing an observation deck that overlooked the containment facility. Maya stepped forward and gasped. The containment area was enormous, a circular chamber nearly 200 meters across, designed to simulate the harsh environment of Vex Prime. Twisted metal structures jutted from the rocky ground like the bones of some ancient civilization, while purple mist swirled through the air. But it was empty. "Where are—" Maya began, then stopped as movement caught her eye. Something flickered near the center of the chamber, like a heat mirage, and then vanished. "They're there," whispered Dr. Kesahai, a crystalline researcher whose body chimed softly as she moved. 3 adults, all captured from different regions of Vex Prime. We've been observing them for 6 months, and they continue to surprise us." As if summoned by her words, one of the creatures materialized from seemingly nowhere. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The Shadow Maw was terrifying and beautiful at once. A massive predator with midnight black skin that seemed to absorb light. Its four eyes glowed like amber stars, and when it moved, it flowed like liquid darkness. Rows of crystalline teeth gleamed in its elongated jaw, and the claws on its six-fingered hands looked sharp enough to cut diamond. "Magnificent," breathed Dr. Vextar. "Notice how it's studying us. It knows we're watching." The Shadow Maw turned its head toward the observation deck, and Maya felt those alien eyes lock onto hers. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, predator and human regarded each other across the barrier of energy and space. Then the creature tilted its head, almost like a curious dog, and Maya could have sworn she saw intelligence there. Not just animal cunning, but genuine understanding. "The feeding will begin shortly," announced Dr. Yildrak, the Kethmori project director. His scarred face and mechanical arm were souvenirs from a previous encounter with a Shadow Maw 15 years ago. "We've learned that they prefer live prey, though they will accept recently deceased organisms." Maya watched in fascination and horror as robotic systems delivered 3 large creatures into the chamber. Something that looked like a cross between a buffalo and a lizard. The Shadow Maws materialized instantly, moving with fluid grace that seemed to defy physics. The hunt was over in seconds, and Maya found herself both repulsed and amazed by their efficiency. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Yildrak called to her, "you'll be working primarily with Dr. Vextar on behavioral analysis. Your background in animal psychology from Earth makes you uniquely qualified to understand predator behavior patterns." Maya nodded, though she felt anything but qualified. "Have you tried any direct interaction protocols?" The entire observation deck went silent. Dr. Yildrak's remaining organic eye fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. Direct interaction? Dr. Kesahai's crystalline form resonated with what Maya recognized as shock. "Dr. Chen, these creatures have killed every researcher who attempted close contact. They show no capacity for domestication, no response to positive reinforcement, and no indication of social bonding outside their own species." "But have you tried?" Maya pressed, something in her gut telling her this was important. "I mean, really tried? Not just scientific observation, but actual communication attempts?" Dr. Vexatar's skin shifted to a deep blue. Embarrassment, she realized. "The risk is considered too great. The Galactic Science Ethics Board specifically forbids direct contact protocols with extinction-class predators." Maya turned back to the containment chamber. The Shadow Maws had finished their meal and were now engaged in what looked almost like play, leaping from structure to structure, appearing and disappearing in flickers of movement that hurt her eyes to follow. But there was something else there, something the other researchers seemed to miss. They were communicating. It was subtle, a flicker of visibility here, a specific movement pattern there. But Maya's training in animal behavior had taught her to look for the patterns others missed. The Shadow Maws weren't just playing, they were talking to each other in a language of light and shadow that no one had bothered to decode. "Dr. Chen?" Dr. Vextar had noticed her intense concentration. "What are you seeing?" "They're not just predators," Maya said slowly, her mind racing as she watched the creatures move. "Look at the pattern of their camouflage flickers. That's not random. It's structured. They're using their adaptive camouflage to communicate with each other." Dr. Kesahai's body chimed in what Maya was learning to recognize as skepticism. "Impossible. We've analyzed every aspect of their behavior for months. There's no evidence of complex communication." But Maya was already pulling up her personal data pad, her fingers flying as she began recording the patterns. She had always been good at seeing things others missed. It was what had gotten her into the program in the first place. While her classmates focused on the obvious aspects of alien behavior, Maya had always looked deeper, searching for the subtle signs that revealed true intelligence. "There, she said, pointing as one of the shadow maws flickered in a specific sequence. And there, the second one just responded with the same pattern, but inverted. That's not coincidence. Dr. Yildrak moved closer, his mechanical arm whirring softly. Even if you're correct, it changes nothing. Communication ability doesn't equal peaceful intent. Some of the most dangerous species in the galaxy are also the most intelligent. Maya nodded, but continued recording. Something was building in her mind, an idea so audacious it made her hands shake. If the shadow maws were truly intelligent, if they were communicating in ways that no one had recognized, then maybe the problem wasn't that they were incapable of forming bonds with other species. Maybe the problem was that no one had ever tried to speak their language. The observation session continued for another 2 hours, with Maya meticulously recording every flicker, every movement, every pattern she could identify. The other researchers continued their standard observations, measuring movement speeds, analyzing feeding patterns, documenting territorial behaviors, standard xenobiology protocol, but Maya was doing something different. She was trying to understand. When the session ended, Maya excused herself early and returned to her assigned quarters, a small but comfortable room on level 7 of the research section. She immediately pulled up every piece of data the station had collected on shadow maw behavior and began cross-referencing it with her own observations. The patterns were there, hidden in months of data that no one had thought to analyze from a communication perspective. The shadow maws weren't just randomly flickering in and out of visibility, they were having conversations. Complex, nuanced conversations that suggested a level of intelligence that rivaled most sentient species. Maya worked through the night, her excitement growing with each new pattern she identified. By morning, she had compiled a preliminary translation matrix, a basic understanding of what she believed to be the shadow maw language. It was beautiful in its complexity. Where most species relied on sound or visual cues, the shadow maws used their adaptive camouflage to create a three-dimensional language of light and shadow. They could express concepts that had no equivalent in human speech, ideas about the nature of darkness, the feeling of perfect hunting, the joy of movement through space. And underlying it all, Maya detected something that made her heart race with possibility. Loneliness. The shadow maws weren't just apex predators trapped in a cage. They were intelligent beings who had been ripped from their world, separated from their communities, and imprisoned by creatures they couldn't understand or communicate with. For months, they had been trying to reach out, trying to make contact with their captors, using the only language they knew. No one had been listening. Maya sat back in her chair, her mind reeling with the implications. If she was right, if the shadow maws were truly intelligent and capable of communication, then everything the galactic scientific community believed about them was wrong. They weren't unstoppable killing machines. They were misunderstood beings reacting to trauma and isolation, but proving it would require something that no one had ever attempted. It would require her to do the one thing that every safety protocol, every regulation, every piece of common sense warned against. She would have to go into the containment chamber and try to talk to them. Maya looked out her small viewport at the swirling clouds of Titan 7, her reflection staring back at her with eyes full of determination and fear. Tomorrow she would propose the impossible to the research team. Tomorrow she would suggest that a rookie human researcher with no field experience be allowed direct contact with the deadliest predators known to galactic civilization. Tomorrow, everything would change. She just hoped she would live to see the results. The emergency meeting convened at 0800 hours in the main conference room, its massive oval table surrounded by the galaxy's most prestigious xenobiologists. Maya sat at the far end, her datapad clutched in sweaty hands as she faced 24 pairs of alien eyes, some curious, some skeptical, and some openly hostile. "This is preposterous," Dr. Yildrak declared, his mechanical arm striking the table with a metallic clang. Dr. Chen has been on this station for exactly 18 hours, and she's proposing to overturn 3 years of research based on what? Patterns that she imagines she sees? Dr. Kesahai's crystalline form chimed with agitation. The Shadow Maws have demonstrated consistent aggressive behavior toward any sentient being. They have killed 17 researchers, destroyed 3 previous research facilities, and shown absolutely no capacity for peaceful interaction. Maya took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Every instinct told her to back down, to defer to the experience and wisdom of her superiors. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw those amber eyes staring at her through the viewport, and she knew she was right. "With respect," Maya said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Every previous interaction has been from the perspective of containment and control. We've never approached them as equals, never attempted to understand their communication methods, never tried to see the situation from their perspective." Their perspective? Dr. Vextar's skin shifted through several shades of purple. "Dr. Chen, they're apex predators. Their perspective is hunt or be hunted." Maya activated her data pad, projecting her analysis onto the room's main display. The holographic representation showed the containment chamber with color-coded overlays, marking each camouflage flicker, each movement pattern, each interaction between the 3 Shadow Maws. "Look at the data," Maya said, standing up despite her trembling legs. "This isn't random behavior. These are structured communication patterns. Watch. When Shadow Maw Alpha flickers in this sequence, Beta responds with this specific pattern within 2.3 seconds every time. That's not coincidence. That's conversation." The room fell silent as the alien scientists examined her analysis. Dr. Kelthara, an elderly Etherian with centuries of experience, leaned forward with interest. "Even if you're correct about communication," she said in her melodious voice, "it doesn't change the fundamental danger. Intelligent predators are often more dangerous than simple ones." "But what if they're not predators at all?" Maya asked, the words tumbling out faster than she could think them through. "What if they're just defending themselves? What if every aggressive response has been because they're terrified, trapped, and unable to communicate their needs?" Dr. Yildrak stood up so quickly, his chair fell backward. "Absolutely not. I will not authorize any direct contact experiment. The liability alone—" "Then let me go in alone," Maya interrupted, shocking herself with her boldness. "No official sanction. No liability to the station. If I'm wrong, you lose 1 inexperienced researcher. If I'm right, we make the greatest xenobiological discovery in galactic history." The room erupted in protests, but Dr. Kelthara raised a graceful hand for silence. "Tell me, Dr. Chen, what makes you think you can succeed where 17 others have failed?" Maya looked around the room at all the brilliant minds, all the accumulated wisdom and experience. They were all so much smarter than her, so much more qualified. But there was one thing she had that they didn't. "I'm human," she said simply. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'It takes one to know one.' But sometimes it takes an outsider to see what everyone else has missed. Humans have a history of forming bonds with creatures that other species consider impossible to tame. We domesticated wolves into dogs, turned wild horses into partners, made friends with creatures that should have eaten us." Dr. Vextar's skin shifted to a deep blue. "Dr. Chen, this isn't some Terran wildlife preserve. These are alien predators that have evolved on a completely different world under completely different pressures." "Exactly," Maya said, her excitement building. "Which means all our assumptions about them are based on our own evolutionary biases. What if the reason no one has succeeded in communicating with them is because no one has tried to understand their evolutionary pressures?" She pulled up another holographic display, this one showing the desolate landscape of Vex Prime. "Look at their home world, constant twilight, limited resources, competing predator species, cooperation wouldn't just be advantageous for them, it would be essential for survival. What we interpret as pack hunting behavior might actually be a highly evolved form of social cooperation. Dr. Kesahai's chimes took on a different tone. You're suggesting they evolved as social beings, not solitary predators? I'm suggesting we don't know, Maya replied, and the only way to find out is to try communicating with them on their terms. The debate continued for 3 hours. Every safety protocol was reviewed, every possible disaster scenario examined, every potential liability discussed. In the end, it was Dr. Kelthara who cast the deciding vote. The potential benefits outweigh the risks, she announced, but we do this with every possible safety measure in place. Personal shield generator, emergency extraction protocols, sedation systems on standby, and a full medical team. And if Dr. Chen shows even the slightest sign of distress, we extract her immediately. Maya spent the next 6 hours in preparation. The engineering team fitted her with the most advanced personal protection system available, a combination energy shield and environmental suit that could theoretically protect her from anything short of a direct nuclear blast. The medical team ran every scan imaginable, establishing baseline readings for immediate comparison during the experiment. But the most important preparation was Maya's own. She spent those hours reviewing every pattern she had identified, every nuance of what she believed to be the Shadow Maw language. She practiced the basic flicker patterns using a modified light array, trying to approximate the complex camouflage communications she had observed. As the time approached, Maya found herself standing before the same blast door she had first seen just 24 hours ago. This time, though, she would be going through it. Final systems check, announced Dr. Vextar from the observation deck. Shield generator active, communication array online, emergency extraction ready. Maya took a deep breath and stepped into the containment chamber airlock. Through the thick, transparent aluminum, she could see the alien landscape that had been recreated to mimic Vex Prime. The purple mist swirled around twisted metal structures, and somewhere in that artificial twilight, 3 of the galaxy's deadliest predators waited. The inner airlock door opened with a soft hiss, and Maya stepped into another world. The gravity was lighter than standard galactic norm, giving each step a floating quality that took a moment to adjust to. The air was thick and humid, carrying scents that had no Earth equivalent, metallic and organic at the same time, like copper mixed with rain-soaked earth. For the first minute, nothing happened. Maya stood near the entrance, her heart hammering as she scanned the chamber for any sign of movement. Then, like shadows given form, the Shadow Maws began to materialize. The first one appeared about 20 meters away, crouched on top of a twisted metal spire. Its 4 eyes glowed like stars in the artificial twilight, and Maya could feel the weight of its attention like a physical presence. The second materialized to her left, moving with liquid grace around the base of a large structure. The third remained invisible, but Maya could sense it, a feeling like being watched by something vast and patient. Easy, Maya whispered, both to herself and to the creatures watching her. She slowly activated the light array she had been fitted with, beginning the basic greeting pattern she had observed in their communications. The reaction was immediate. All 3 Shadow Maws flickered into full visibility, their own camouflage patterns shifting in what Maya recognized as surprise. The one on the spire tilted its head, the same gesture she had seen from the observation deck, and responded with a pattern she hadn't seen before. "Did you see that?" Maya said softly into her communication link. "They responded. They understand that I'm trying to communicate." "Vitals elevated but stable," reported Dr. Vexitar. "Continue with extreme caution." Maya repeated the greeting pattern, then tried a variation she hoped meant something like peaceful intent. The response came not from one Shadow Maw, but from all 3 at once, a synchronized display of light and shadow that was breathtakingly beautiful. Slowly, carefully, Maya began to walk deeper into the chamber. The shadow maws moved with her, maintaining distance, but showing no signs of aggression. Instead, they seemed curious, their flicker patterns becoming more complex as they communicated among themselves. Then something unexpected happened. The shadow maw that had been invisible suddenly materialized directly in front of Maya, close enough that she could see her reflection in its amber eyes. Every safety protocol screamed at her to activate her emergency extraction, but something in those eyes stopped her. There was no aggression there, no predatory hunger. Instead, Maya saw something that made her heart skip: recognition. The creature was smaller than the others, its movements more tentative. As Maya watched, it slowly extended one six-fingered hand toward her, claws retracted, palm open in what could only be described as an offering. "Oh my God," Maya breathed. "It's trying to shake hands." "Dr. Chen, extract immediately." Dr. Yildrak's voice crackled through her comm. "This is exactly how the previous incidents began." But Maya was already moving, slowly extending her own hand toward the waiting creature. When their hands touched, alien flesh against human skin through the thin barrier of her gloves, something extraordinary happened. The shadow maw's camouflage flowed like liquid starlight, patterns of communication flowing across its skin in waves of meaning that Maya could suddenly, impossibly understand. Not the words, but the intent behind them: loneliness, confusion, hope, questions about her strange appearance, her alien scent, her incomprehensible technology, and underneath it all, a desperate desire for connection that transcended species barriers. Maya began to cry, tears streaming down her face inside her helmet as she finally understood what they had been trying to say all along. These weren't monsters or killing machines. They were people, alien people with their own thoughts, dreams, and fears, who had been trapped and imprisoned by beings they couldn't understand. "They're not dangerous," Maya whispered into her comm, her voice thick with emotion. "They're scared. They've been trying to communicate with us for months, and we never listened. They don't understand why we keep them locked up. They just want to go home." The other two shadow maws moved closer, their own hands extended in greeting. Soon, Maya found herself surrounded by three massive predators who had somehow transformed into something else entirely. Three individuals with their own personalities, their own quirks, their own ways of viewing the universe. The smallest one, whose hand she still held, seemed to be female. Her communication patterns were complex and nuanced, full of questions about Maya's homeworld and her people. The largest, definitely male, was more cautious but intensely curious about her technology. The third was harder to read, somewhere between the other two in both size and personality. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered to them, knowing they couldn't understand her words, but hoping they could sense her sincerity. "I'm so sorry we didn't understand." The female shadow maw's camouflage shifted in what Maya was learning to recognize as amusement. She released Maya's hand and stepped back, then did something that made everyone watching from the observation deck gasp in shock. She sat down, not in a predatory crouch, not in a defensive position, but cross-legged like a child waiting for a story. The other two followed suit, and suddenly Maya found herself in the middle of what could only be described as a conversation circle. For the next 2 hours they talked, not in words but in patterns of light and gesture and expression that transcended language barriers. Maya learned that the shadow maws had names for themselves, concepts that roughly translated to swift in darkness, patient hunter, and seeker of new things. She learned that they came from a rich culture with art and music and philosophy that humans had never imagined, and she learned that they had been waiting, not for someone to study them or control them, but for someone to simply see them as people. When the session finally ended and Maya emerged from the containment chamber, she found the entire observation deck in stunned silence. Dr. Yildrak stared at the displays showing her vital signs, completely normal throughout the entire encounter. Dr. Kesahai's crystalline form chimed in what Maya now recognized as wonder. "This changes everything," Dr. Kelthara said softly. "If the Shadow Maws are truly sentient beings rather than simple predators, then every assumption we've made about apex predator species needs to be reconsidered." Maya nodded, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. In the space of one afternoon, she had taken the galaxy's most feared predators and revealed them to be something else entirely. But as she looked back at the containment chamber, where 3 alien beings sat waiting for her return, Maya realized her work was just beginning. She had proven that communication was possible, but now she faced an even greater challenge. How do you give freedom to beings that the entire galaxy fears? How do you convince civilizations that what they thought were monsters are actually people? And most importantly, how do you make up for months of imprisonment to beings who had been crying out for understanding that never came? Maya looked around at the assembled scientists, seeing the mixture of excitement and uncertainty in their expressions. They wanted to study the Shadow Maws' culture, catalog their communication methods, write papers about this groundbreaking discovery. But Maya had looked into their eyes. She had felt their loneliness, their confusion, their hope, and she knew that the real work, the work of making things right, was just beginning. Tomorrow, she would have to convince the galaxy that everything it believed about the Shadow Maws was wrong. Tomorrow, she would have to become an advocate for beings that most species considered nightmares. Tomorrow, a rookie human would have to change the universe. 3 weeks after her first contact with the Shadow Maws, Maya stood before the Galactic Science Council on Nexus Prime, facing the most powerful scientific minds from across the galaxy. The vast amphitheater stretched out before her, filled with representatives from 47 different species, each one capable of ending her career with a single vote. "The implications of Dr. Chen's claims," announced Council Speaker Veltara, her crystalline form resonating with authority, "extend far beyond simple xenobiology. If the Shadow Maws are indeed sentient beings, as she suggests, then we face the largest interspecies rights crisis in galactic history." Maya stood at the central podium, her hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Behind her, massive holographic displays showed footage from her weeks of communication sessions with Swift in Darkness, Patient Hunter, and Seeker of New Things. The videos had already sparked heated debates across every major world. "Council members," Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. 3 weeks ago, I was just another rookie researcher who thought she understood the universe. Today, I'm here to ask you to consider the possibility that everything we thought we knew about apex predator species might be wrong." "Preposterous," interrupted Councillor Drexman of the Kethmori Empire. His scarred face bore the same marks as Dr. Yildrak, another survivor of Shadow Maw encounters. "The Shadow Maws have terrorized our border worlds for generations. They have destroyed colonies, killed thousands of our citizens, and resisted every attempt at peaceful contact." "With respect, Counselor," Maya replied, "every contact attempt has been made from a position of assumed superiority. Your people approached them as conquerors trying to subdue a dangerous animal. The humans approached them as researchers trying to study a specimen. No one has ever tried simply talking to them as equals." She activated the holographic display, showing a recording from 2 days earlier. Swift in Darkness sat across from Maya in what had become their regular meeting area, her camouflage patterns flowing in complex communications. As the recording played, Maya provided real-time translation. "She's explaining the concept of home song," Maya narrated. It's a cultural practice where shadow maws use their camouflage to paint stories about their ancestral territories. Each flicker pattern represents a different aspect of their homeland. The feeling of specific types of stone under their feet, the scent of certain atmospheric conditions, the emotional resonance of places where their ancestors once lived. The chamber fell silent as the recording continued, showing the alien being creating what could only be described as poetry made of light and shadow. When it ended, Counselor Etheri of the Etherian Collective leaned forward with obvious fascination. "The complexity is remarkable," she admitted. "But Dr. Chen, even if the Shadow Maws possess advanced communication abilities, it doesn't negate their history of violence against other species." Maya had been preparing for this argument for weeks. She activated another display, this one showing a detailed analysis of every recorded Shadow Maw attack over the past 2 centuries. "Look at the patterns," she said, highlighting specific data points. Every single attack occurred either during territorial expansion by other species, resource extraction operations on or near Vex Prime, or attempted captures for research purposes. The Shadow Maws have never initiated unprovoked aggression against any species that left their world alone. "You're suggesting they were defending themselves?" asked Counselor Zeftos, her aquatic environment suit bubbling softly. "I'm suggesting they were protecting their home," Maya replied. "Swift in Darkness has shown me what Vex Prime was like before the mining operations began. It wasn't the dead world we see today. It was a thriving ecosystem with multiple Shadow Maw communities, complex social structures, and a rich cultural heritage that spanned millennia." She pulled up a reconstruction based on the Shadow Maw's own descriptions. A world of twilight beauty with crystalline forests and flowing water, populated by beings who had built a civilization based on harmony with their environment. "The reason Vex Prime is a dead world today is because we killed it," Maya continued, her voice carrying the weight of terrible truth. "The Kethmori strip-mined it for rare minerals. The Aquarian Collective drained its water reserves. The Terran Federation harvested its atmospheric gases. By the time we started studying the Shadow Maws, we had already destroyed everything they had ever known." The chamber erupted in protests and arguments, but Council Speaker Veltara called for order. "Dr. Chen, even accepting your interpretation of events, the fact remains that Shadow Maws in captivity have demonstrated extreme aggression. How do you explain the deaths of 17 researchers?" Maya had saved the most difficult truth for last. She pulled up psychological profiles that she and Dr. Vextar had compiled over the past weeks. "The 3 Shadow Maws currently in our facility are suffering from what humans would classify as severe post-traumatic stress disorder," she explained. "They were captured during the final destruction of their home communities. Swift in Darkness watched her entire family die in a mining explosion. Patient Hunter was the last survivor of his settlement when atmospheric processors stripped away breathable air. Seeker of New Things was separated from her offspring during capture operations." The holographic display showed brain scans that Dr. Kesahai had reluctantly agreed to perform, revealing neural patterns consistent with extreme psychological trauma across all known species. "Every previous researcher who attempted contact approached them as specimens to be studied," Maya continued. "Imagine being the last survivor of your destroyed world, imprisoned by the very beings who destroyed it, and having them treat you like a laboratory animal. How would any of us react?" Counselor Drexman stood up, his mechanical prosthetics whirring. "Even if all of this is true, Dr. Chen, it doesn't change the fundamental problem. The Shadow Maws are too dangerous for normal containment. They can become invisible at will, they possess strength that exceeds most military armor, and they've demonstrated the ability to escape from supposedly secure facilities." "Which brings me to my formal recommendation," Maya said, her heart pounding as she approached the moment that would define her entire career. "I propose we don't contain them at all. I recommend immediate repatriation to a suitable world where they can rebuild their civilization." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates were on their feet, shouting in dozens of languages, their various communication methods creating a cacophony that the translation systems couldn't handle. "Absolutely impossible!" Counselor Drexmon roared over the noise. "Release the galaxy's most dangerous predators! The liability alone! They're not predators!" Maya shouted back, her professional composure finally cracking. "They're people, traumatized, grieving people who have lost everything and been imprisoned by strangers who don't even see them as individuals." Council Speaker Veltara's resonating call for order gradually restored quiet to the chamber. "Dr. Chen," she said carefully, "what you're proposing would require overturning centuries of established policy regarding dangerous species management. The political ramifications would be nothing compared to the moral ramifications of continued imprisonment," Maya interrupted. "Council members, I've spent every day for the past 3 weeks talking with these beings. I've learned their names, their histories, their hopes for the future. Swift in Darkness dreams of finding other survivors and teaching them the old songs her grandmother used to sing. Patient Hunter wants to plant the seeds he's been carrying since his world died, to see if anything from home can grow somewhere else. Seeker of New Things hopes that somewhere in the galaxy, her children might still be alive." Maya's voice broke slightly as she continued. "They're not asking for special treatment or compensation. They just want what every sentient being deserves, the right to exist freely, to grieve their losses, and to try to build something new from what remains." Dr. Kelthara, who had been silent throughout the session, finally spoke. "Dr. Chen, what makes you believe that repatriation would be successful? How do we know they won't simply return to aggressive behavior once released?" Maya smiled for the first time during the hearing. "Because I asked them, and because they've already proven it's possible." She activated one final holographic display, showing footage from just yesterday. The 3 Shadow Maws sat in their containment area, but everything about their behavior had changed. They were creating art together, complex light sculptures that told stories of their lost world. They were teaching Maya their language, patient with her clumsy attempts to communicate through technology instead of natural camouflage. Most remarkably, they had begun creating something new. Art that incorporated elements of human culture, stories that bridged the gap between species. "This is what happens when you treat intelligent beings as people instead of specimens," Maya explained. "In 3 weeks, we've achieved more genuine scientific understanding than 3 years of traditional research methods produced." Counselor Ethrai leaned forward, her ethereal features thoughtful. "What specific guarantees can you offer regarding future peaceful behavior?" "The same guarantees any species can offer," Maya replied. "None. But I can tell you this, the Shadow Maws have spent the past week learning about human history, and they're particularly fascinated by our stories of redemption and second chances. They understand that they're being given an opportunity that most species would never offer, and they're determined not to waste it." The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued about legal precedents, security concerns, and political implications. Maya answered every question, addressed every concern, and gradually watched as the opposition began to soften. It was Counselor Drexmon who finally provided the breakthrough. The Kethmori representative stood slowly, his organic eye fixed on Maya's face. "Dr. Chen," he said quietly, "you've made me reconsider events that I've carried with me for 15 years. If there's even a possibility that the attack that cost me my arm and my crew was actually a desperate defense of someone's home." He paused, struggling with emotions that were clearly visible despite his alien features. "Perhaps it's time for my people to consider whether we've been viewing this situation from the wrong perspective." The vote, when it came, was closer than Maya had hoped, but decisive enough to matter. 26 in favor of repatriation, 18 opposed, with 3 abstentions. 2 months later, Maya stood on the observation deck of the transport ship New Beginnings. As it approached Kepler-7, a world similar enough to Vex Prime to support Shadow Maw life, but different enough to represent a true fresh start. The planet hung before them like a promise, a world of purple twilight and crystal formations where 3 survivors could begin the long work of rebuilding. Swift in Darkness appeared beside her at the viewport, her camouflage patterns flickering with what Maya had learned to recognize as excitement mixed with nervous anticipation. "Home feeling," she communicated through the light array Maya now wore as naturally as clothing. "Different, same as old home memory." "New home," Maya replied in the simplified patterns she had mastered. "New beginning for Swift in Darkness and family chosen." Patient hunter and seeker of new things joined them at the viewport, their own communications creating a symphony of light that needed no translation. They were afraid but hopeful, grieving but ready to try again, alone but not lonely anymore. The ship landed on a crystalline plateau overlooking a vast valley filled with formations that resembled the artwork the Shadow Maws had been creating. As the cargo doors opened and the 3 aliens stepped onto the surface of their new world, Maya felt a completeness she hadn't known she was missing. "Will you visit?" Swift in Darkness asked, her patterns now tinged with something Maya recognized as affection. "Every year," Maya promised, "to learn new songs, share new stories." She watched as the 3 Shadow Maws moved into their new environment with the fluid grace she had first seen in containment, but now their movement spoke of freedom rather than captivity. They began to flicker in complex patterns, not conversations this time, but something deeper. They were painting the story of their arrival onto the landscape itself, creating art that would welcome any other survivors who might someday find this place. As the New Beginnings prepared to depart, Maya received a priority message from the Galactic Science Consortium. The success of the Shadow Maw repatriation had triggered a cascade of new initiatives. A dozen other species previously classified as uncontainable threats were being reconsidered. Communication protocols based on Maya's methods were being developed for species that had never been approached as sentient beings. The message ended with an official appointment. Dr. Maya Chen, Director of Interspecies Understanding, with a mandate to revolutionize how the galaxy approached contact with misunderstood species. Maya smiled as she looked out at Kepler-7, where 3 shapes moved through the twilight like living shadows, free at last to be themselves. A year ago, she had been a nervous rookie with more questions than answers. Today, she was something the galaxy had never seen before, a human who had looked at monsters and seen people. But as the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying her toward new challenges and new opportunities to bridge the gaps between species, Maya realized the most important truth of all. She hadn't tamed the deadliest beasts in the galaxy. She had simply reminded them that they were never beasts at all. In the months that followed, as reports filtered back from Kepler-7, the galaxy learned something that would reshape interspecies relations for generations to come. The 3 Shadow Maws hadn't just survived their relocation, they had thrived. They had built a small settlement in the Crystal Valley, developed new art forms that incorporated elements from their destroyed homeworld and their new environment, and most remarkably, they had begun broadcasting messages into space. Not warnings or threats, but invitations. Songs of welcome in patterns of light that could be seen from orbit, calling to any other survivors who might be hiding among the stars. The galaxy's deadliest predators had become teachers, sharing the greatest lesson their new human friend had taught them. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply see someone as they really are. And sometimes, that simple act of recognition can change the entire universe.